Okay, everyone, this is my snap review, if you want to call it that. The WWE highlights for from Raw, February 28th, 2022, through SmackDown, March 4th, 2022. So I'm going to be a little bit biased in a lot of ways towards Raw when I do this, and the Excess episode when I do that either tomorrow night or Monday morning. But truth be told, Raw was just awesome, and I was there live, and that's the reason I'm going to be biased towards it. Anyway, let's get to it. First, the honorable mentions for the week. First honorable mention has to be, I think, the Street Profits beating RK Bro. Not only was it significant that the Street Profits beat RK Bro, but apparently, and I was there live, I didn't notice it at the time, but apparently Montez Ford landed wrong on Randy Orton. So, which sucks, and I guess Randy Orton may be injured, so hopefully not, but we'll see if Randy is there on Monday. Either way, it was a great match, but I think that deserved an honorable mention. Another honorable mention, how the show started out with the KO show. Us in the crowd, we were loving it. We were loving KO as well Kevin Owens as well as Seth Rollins. And of course, everything with the Alpha Academy was hilarious. I love this. And I should include the Alpha Academy losing to Seth and KO as part of the honorable mention. Should have been in the top 5 because it was so awesome, but I didn't want to be too biased towards Raw. But it was funny. This whole segment was. The match itself was great. The crowd was just super into it. It was a lot of fun. So this was just a great way to kick off the show, I thought. Another honorable mention here, and I'm just trying to look through my notes here. But another honorable mention has to go to Austin Theory and Pat McAfee. So Austin Theory, before Raw started, they recorded Main Event, and Austin Theory won his matchup. And it was pretty fun to watch. He was against Apollo Crews. So, I mean, it was a lot of fun. The crowd was into it. I thought all the parts with the selfies was funny. But, yeah, I mean, that was hilarious and all. But I thought, this build towards WrestleMania, a lot of people were speculating because of the stupid dirt sheets, were saying that Vince McMahon was going to be in a match with Pat McAfee. But Vince McMahon and them, they baited the dirt sheets again, and now Pat McAfee will be going in a match against Austin Theory. Interesting build here. Austin Theory trying to impress McMahon. McAfee is just great on commentary, and he's also really good in the ring. Some people might forget, but he's awesome in the ring. So you're going to have quite the show with McAfee and Theory, I think. Okay, that does it for honorable mentions. Now let's move on to the top 5. So number 5, I'm going to give it to NXT. The main event, Carmelo Hayes versus Pete Dunne, was excellent. Everything that Pete Dunne does is great. Everything that Carmelo Hayes does is great. Melo definitely doesn't miss when he shoots. And he will be going to the main roster, in no time, especially with just how good he is on the mic in the ring. And in the ring, I should say. Pete Dunne, of course, delivering here, but Melo gets the win. Just a great way to end NXT. And NXT, of course, with this match, made it obviously into the top 5. Almost didn't, though, because of Raw. Number 4, Ricochet becoming the new Intercontinental Champion. Just great stuff. The guy deserves it. He's been working hard, although he was made to be a jobber for the longest time as McMahon had lost faith in him. But now it seems like Vince has faith in him again, and he's now the Intercontinental Champion, the Workhorse Champion. I don't know. I just love Ricochet as champion. So we had both Workhorse titles, the U.S. and Intercontinental titles, changing hands here. And that, of course, brings me to number 3 with Finn Balor defeating Damian Priest. Just a great moment here. And this match was really fun to watch. It was the main event. Not the main event segment, but it was the main event match of Raw. We in the crowd, we were loving it. We were cheering for Finn. When Finn won, we just lost it. And just, great moment for Finn Balor becoming Intercontinental Champion again. Not Intercontinental, but becoming U.S. Champion, I mean. And then the best part was Damian Priest turning heel. So Priest needed to turn heel, and he did it in the best way. just great stuff here. And you might have a Priest versus Finn match at WrestleMania, which I'm completely fine with. So that's number 3. Number 2, the main event segment of Raw. Was feeling it. I popped when Edge came out there, and then I popped again when AJ Styles came out to answer the challenge. And, Edge turning heel as well, attacking AJ Styles. Just a great way to end Raw and to kick off this feud, this rivalry going into WrestleMania. Such a great story I think this is going to be. WrestleMania is shaping up to be quite a good show, but a lot of people out there are sour on it because of the build. You know what? It's fine. A lot of things have been fluid because a whole bunch of stuff has been happening. But I think it's going to be a great show. I mean, WrestleMania, they're going to deliver. And then that takes me to number 1. Speaking of delivering, Roman Reigns gave an awesome promo. He is again a number 1 because it's hard to keep Roman Reigns off the top spot. And of course, I'll be getting more into this when I record the Excess episode. But Roman Reigns, with this promo, yet another great delivery, basically insisting that Brock Lesnar and everyone will acknowledge him at the end of WrestleMania. Just great promo. I love everything that he and Heyman and Brock are doing. It's going to be a shame when Brock has to retire. Heck, it's going to be a shame down the line when Roman has to retire. I'm going to miss these days. But you know what? They're in good hands right now, in the hands of the Tribal Chief, Roman Reigns. And that does it for this quick review of the highlights of WWE for this past week.
Hi everyone, this is Daniel Crawford here, and this is a little bit of an update on what's going on in the world. And by the time I do this update officially and post it as part of my Inequality Chronicles podcast, things may have changed by then, and I do plan on some major changes happening to my blogs here soon. So I actually might even post this before too long here, probably within the next couple weeks. But anyways, so probably the biggest news that's going on in the world right now outside of the pandemic and the economy, as well as gas prices, is in foreign policy. And the biggest thing in foreign policy at this moment, May 17th, 2021, which is when I'm recording this, that seems to be the news about what's going on in Israel. So I'm not going to get into all the history about Israel right now, but we have to recognize one thing about it. In the late 1940s, when I think it was 1948, when the United Nations came together and decided that Israel needed its own state because of the oppression of the people, the oppression of the Jewish people, and of course the recent horrors of the Holocaust. And we have to recognize one thing before moving forward: the Holocaust happened. It was real. So anyone who says otherwise is an idiot who should just move on from this, because I'm not going to entertain your stupid conspiracy theories about that. The Holocaust happened. End of story. And people who were of Jewish descent, people who were of Israeli descent, they have been oppressed for a long time over the centuries by countries across the world. And it's happened. So we have to recognize that fact, number one. Number two, we also have to recognize that criticizing the state of Israel is not anti-Semitic. It is not something that should be recognized as a broad stroke against everyone who is Jewish, period. It's just because it is a Jewish state and it is the only Jewish state in the planet, I believe. Just because of that fact, it doesn't mean that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic, because Israel is not a country that can do no wrong. It is still ran by humans at the end of the day. So let's take that fact into consideration. Finally here, once again, remember that fact about how Israel, the current incarnation of Israel, came into existence. After the horrors of the Holocaust, realized that they had to have their own state to help give them some kind of escape from oppression that they had suffered for centuries. And so that's why we are where we are right now. with this understanding of the situation, I should say. So considering that, how Israel came into existence, that these Western imperial powers, and that's what they were, the empires of France and Great Britain, or I should say the Empire of the United Kingdom, as well as the, at the time, fledgling empire, still fledgling empire of the United States. These empires came together and decided, hey, we need to create a Jewish state somewhere in or around the traditional or ancient territory that we know of its past. And of course, Israel did exist in the past, because I do believe there are some records of it in the ancient past. But anyways, moving on, we had to look at that, and the fact that as before, this decision by Western imperial powers as they headed the United Nations, before that, it was occupied primarily by Palestinian peoples. It was recognized at the time as Palestine, because that's what it was. It was primarily an Arab country. So, the nation of Palestine was basically broken up, because it was an imperial, it was a conquered land, unfortunately, by the Western imperial powers. And so they decided to put the Israelis there, create the state of Israel, recreate the state of Israel. And ever since then, you've had conflicts that have happened, like either from the rebellious people of the area, like saying, hey, look, this is our land, why are you coming in here doing this? And then, of course, more often than not, aggression from Israel itself to expand their borders beyond what they were originally given. And the biggest expansion happened in, I believe it was 1967. And I think it was the Yom Kippur War. I hope I'm not mixing up with the conflict. I think it was in 1973. Excuse me, because I'm not looking at anything in front of me. But I know there were at least, I think there was 3 major conflicts in the 20th century where they expanded their borders. There were some others here and there, but that's where the biggest expansions happened, like in the late 1940s, in the late 1960s, and then again in the 1970s there was expansion of powers. I think the 1970s involved Egypt, if I remember correctly. So, when you consider that, and the fact that these territories have been expanded upon by Israel itself, so they are now Israeli territories, Israel, it did not emerge as a grassroots effort. Basically, it did not emerge organically. We have to remember that. It was imposed upon the peoples of the area forcefully from the West. So, we have to remember, this doesn't mean that the people of Israel themselves are evil. It just means that, you have a series of bad things that have happened from, the Holocaust, as well as all the terrible things that happened long before it, even all the way up through the Holocaust. All these things that happened towards Jewish peoples. And then, of course, it culminates with World War II, and then leading to the creation of Israel, the state of Israel. But then Israel starts expanding its borders and doing that aggressively, with the backing, oftentimes, of the United States, unfortunately. And then, of course, this leads to our current predicament, where you have the people of Palestine, the Palestinians, they don't really have self-governance. They are only quasi-independent. Semi-autonomous, if you will, but even that's kind of a joke, because they're basically subjugated by the Israeli government, and the Israeli government has become sadly more and more authoritarian over time, especially with the rise of Benjamin Netanyahu, or Bibi Netanyahu as he is called, oftentimes. But he's become basically a fascist right-wing leader over time, become more authoritarian, demonizing the Palestinian people. Yes, they do use suicide bombers. The Palestinian Authority does from time to time. It seems, they fight back a lot, and this is obviously not celebrated for good reason by the Israelis. So they don't recognize the legitimacy of any kind of military response by the Palestinians, because the Palestinians don't have a military. They are occupied. So we have to remember, put all this in context before we look at what's going on today. And what's going on today is, once again, the people of Palestine are fighting back. And I remember this has been a debate that's been going on for decades about whether or not there should be a free and independent state of Palestine to coexist with Israel. And I think there should be. Back when I was a teenager, I was not of that opinion back then, because I had a lot more to learn. And I originally had us believe that there shouldn't be a two-state solution because I thought it was anti-Israeli. But reality is, the people of Palestine deserve to have their own freedom. They deserve to be able to have their own government and choose their own future. And the fact that even now, the Israelis are still expanding their territories. Like they basically captured, I think it was in 2007, the Golan Heights, which actually belonged to, I want to say, Syria or Lebanon, one of those two. But they basically captured the Golan Heights, and they're occupying that, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank. They have expanded, and they have territories where they have Israeli settlements out, like expanding out there. So they're trying to absorb all of what they consider to be Israel. And of course, Israel actually is more of a square shape. So it's actually, its traditional borders are believed to be much bigger than what it is right now, like maybe 3 times the size that it is right now. But that would be a massive war if they were to do that. Of course, if they were to keep doing what they're doing right now, they could very well pull the rest of the region into a major war. And that's a major concern, especially if Syria gets involved and Russia gets involved. And you don't want that. Anyways, moving on. We have to look at this. The Palestinian people have a right also to defend themselves. And right now, there are reports that civilian residencies are being attacked, being bombed by the Israelis as well. Of course, Palestinians are Hamas, I should say, is the governing body right now over the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinians are responding in kind, but I guess the media has been attacked by the Israeli government, and then sacred sites have actually been torched recently by Israelis. And this is escalating too quickly. So I think no matter who is in the wrong, whether it's us, here in the United States, whether it's Great Britain, Germany, Russia, or Israel, or the Palestinians, whoever is in the wrong, we need to call them out for it. And right now, Israel seems to be in the wrong, especially as they're using this. All this violence has been a response by the Palestinians to continued illegal settlements by the Israelis to try and expand their territories, kind of a backdoor expansion. We have to call them out on this. And I think that they should be sanctioned, especially if they are violating international law by attacking residential buildings and the media. Those are both war crimes. So that should be called out. I know we're hesitant to call them fascists and to say they're violating the laws of war, committing war crimes, violating international law. I know we're hesitant to do that because of the history which precedes the creation of the State of Israel in its current incarnation. I know we're hesitant to that because of the history of the other fascists that we know of, the Nazis and the fascists of Italy. Yes, all that precedes all this, but just because of that, it should not preclude us from talking out and speaking out about what's going on in Israel. So I know this was a long rant about that, but there's much more that can be said by people who are way smarter than me on this issue of Israel. I just know what is wrong, and we should call it out as such. And that's that. So thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time.
But yeah, either way, past before I go, Wonderland. That's
the beginning of the series.
Somewhat because there is another song that's kind of serious, but it's kind of supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
At the same time, but Wonderland, that's just psycho shit. That's
right.
That's a song about you're giving your all, you're losing your mind, and that's brag. Brag is setting it up as like you're losing your fucking mind, and then like you're spiraling down that staircase into the bottom, and then like I'm the snap. Mine's the snap. You're casting out vengeance for what's been done to you. I snap and I do some shit. Listen to the song if you want to hear it.
Wonderland and I'm the Mad Hatter. My psyche scattered, thoughts are scattered. Down the rabbit hole, our fates are tethered. Take a seat, top a teeth around grow matter. Time is ticking, talking quick. Mind is drifting, sinking quickly. Living like I'm dope to wanna hang on a rope. I'm slipping on a sludge, getting so hard to go. Get a big head, I'm a rose girl from red. Take the scissors, cut the bread. Make this Wonderland a bed. Eat this, then I'll drink this. There's no reason for me to resist. How can such madness exist? That I hold my mind to this shit. You see me coming and going, got me twisting. What does it mean unknown? Always go forward, get the blood flowing. Body glowing, left hanging and flowing. We all doing here, my panic is growing. What's the time with enough that work we're showing? Different, but I ain't room. We keep escalating fast from no sense of slow. Vision innocent, my city, diminishing individuals and conditions. Delivered, keep on the ignorance is over, they're hanging my city. But you know, it's a policy from my whose death is a profit. Some days I might be good, days in my summer, get down with the cities. Remaining the process, we come out of birth like I never let bother me. Wonderland and I'm the Mad Hatter. My psyche's shattered, thoughts are scattered. Down the rabbit hole, our fates are tattered. Take a speak, drop a teeth around for grown matter. We are Wonderland and I'm the Mad Hatter. My psyche's shattered, thoughts are scattered. Down the rabbit hole, our fates are tattered. Take a speak, drop a teeth around for grown matter. Getting my revenge, the room fills with laughter. Raising my weapon, I silence the shatter. Race behind your hubby for the shotgun spatter. So you can get slathered in his spray matter. Time to start to scream in absolute fright. Fearing I'll turn the gun on you, scared for your life. Your screams get louder as I pull out the knife. I start stabbing his body, screaming out, why? Why help me fix my heart with some unknown jaws? This is what it feels like walking through closed doors. Man, it's picking them, I always chose horse. After death, we'll be neighbors, I'll be below a few floors. But before we set up shop in the deep south, I'm not killing you, so just